Language and composition students, I know you're probably tired of listening to me, but hopefully you're picking up some new information about vocab, grammar, so on, right? How to take these multiple choice tests. So this is lesson 50, I think, a third part of our multiple choice explanation. So we're on the third passage. We're just looking at some of the questions now. So, did you have a lot of, okay, some people like question on 23, 24, 25, a lot on 26. So yeah, let's start going through this. Okay, so well, this should be pretty easy. The Nantucketers, maybe they weren't conquerors, but they were, like, they mastered the sea. Were they exploiters? No. They weren't taking advantage of at someone else's expense. No. So that's why that's E. 24, there was a question. The tone. Now, remember, I explained how he was using hyperbole. It's hyperbolic. It isn't just a geometric term. He admires them, and he uses a lot of hyperbole. That's why it's C. There wasn't a lot of... Pedantic means that you're very overly careful about detail and so on. That's not as... That might be a new word for you. Okay, so pompous means you're kind of full of yourself. No, it's this. Question, there was one on 25. The most probable reason for repeating and italicizing there, emphasize a sense of place. In the middle of paragraph 4, let me look at that. Yes, and I did point that out, that there meant the sea, right? So their place was in the sea. Now, a lot of people had question on 26, I think, so let's look at that. Oh, I explained that. All right, when we move to paragraph 3, the answer is B, because we're moving from the focus on the island, the land, to the inhabitants on the land. I did explain that, so I'm glad I pointed that out. Number 27, yes, a lot of questions on that. So that ties in with the previous passage. It's a similar question. So let's look at that. The first paragraph contains an extended example of, and the answer is parallel structure. It's your same idea that I brought up before, the previous passage. It says, take out your map, see, look at it. What are all those imperatives? So it's parallel structure. You got to know your grammar. You must know your grammar. That you did not listen to those videos at the beginning of the year about grammar, and it's gonna, hey, not gonna help you, right? So, 28, there were a few questions. Right, okay, the legend of how the island was settled, a mythic quality. Remember, his purpose here is to admire, to be very admiring of the Nantucketers and their control and use of the sea so effectively. And doing this gives the island a, almost a unrealistic, but better than the actual feeling for the island. It has a special quality because it's sort of legendary. So that goes along with his purpose to admire the Nantucketers. Okay. What else do we have here? Yeah, there were questions on 29. Yes, the paragraph where they first went into the sea a little and were able to be a little bit effective in finding food, then a little further out, then a little further out. Incremental details, right? Guide the structure, of that paragraph. They guide the structure, incremental details. First, they were able to do this. Later, they went out a little further and did that. Incremental, gradually more and more. That's what incremental means. 31 question. Right. This is a sea animal, and this is a land animal. Okay? This is an island, and this is fairly landlocked. Okay? So more water-based and more land-based. So that's why this is the right answer. Okay. 31, a few questions. Yes, this is an epithet, like a nickname that conveys the quality of, that's what epithet is, of the whale. Okay. Sea Mastodon. Look, it even describes the whale in terms of a land and sea together. So, and 32, nothing, 33, 34, and 35. So there was a little bit on the rest of them. So it's like here. Melville uses thus twice. What is the reason for using thus a second time? All right, so the answer being 1 and 2, to begin a comparative legend with the Nantucketer settling the sea to balance the first part of the passage with the second part. All right, a comparative legend. Well, I'll see what your answer is saying that, though you already would have looked at that. In this question, the repetition balances the dual focus, the island and its inhabitants. The diction and syntax of the selection are not formal, but rather a grand folk myth. So, if you look at this, comparative, sea, land sort of thing, and then if you look at the rest of it, part 2 said to balance the first one. So this is very similar to the next one, to balance the first part of the passage, the land-based with the sea-based. So it's all about linking two things, sea and land, thus. So that's what that's for. Now, they're trying to trick you by giving you Roman numeral 3 about formality to reinforce. Is the whole path, thus is sort of formal, but the whole passage isn't. And number 34, I did explain there was hyperbole. That's the answer for that. And number 35, we know that this is what keeps repeating, so we shouldn't get it wrong. Okay, so we do have that. Let me see my time. So we're going to go on to the next section. All right. Well, here's from the mid-1800s, a woman who was very unhappy. The world was not a good place for women back then, and so that's what this section is about. Okay. All right. So, yeah, definitely. The theme right here is in education, in marriage, in religion and everything, disappointment is the lot of woman. Back in the mid-1800s. Pretty dismal, right? So then there's a question about, so that's the main idea, but there's a question about this right here. It shall be the business of my life to deepen this disappointment in every woman's heart until she bows down to it no longer. I'm going to make every woman really feel this disappointment, she says, so deeply that it won't even affect her anymore. It's sort of illogical. That's a paradox, right? So, or it could be termed irony, but it is pretty illogical, so we call it paradox. So next part of this passage. The question of women's rights is a practical one, right? One of the questions has to do with that. It's not philosophical, it's not abstract, it's practical. So hopefully we can remember that. The notion has prevailed that it was only an ephemeral idea for women's rights. Ephemeral means transitory or not long-lasting, all right? Ephemeral. Okay. I think there might be a question about this right here. Trace all the doctrines to their source and they will be found to have no basis. What will be found to have no basis? The doctrines, right? The doctrines about a woman's inferiority, I think, is what it's referring to there. It's interesting. So she refers to other countries that don't treat women so negatively, and that's for support that it's not true, that it should always happen if other people don't do it. Women and dogs, she says women and Negroes, and the other part women and dogs, so, African Americans didn't have rights back then, and so they were lower to people, and, dogs are low too. Nowadays we don't think about that, think about African Americans like that, but we have to go back to the time period. So she links women to African Americans and dogs, that they're not treated well. Of course, blacks were not treated well as slaves. And then finally, I have confidence in the Father to believe that when He gives, and she goes on there, this is really an emotional appeal to pathos, okay? And she has 3 parts to it, and then she ends, do not tell us. So, she's very firm, you can tell that she's a little bit angry there. So they use the term indignant. She's a little disgusted. So let me check my time. I do have a little more time. So let's go through a few of these questions. So where did you have questions on this section? Let's see. Starts with 36. Oh, not too bad. 36, 37, 40, 42. All right, the tone. She is setting up an argument. She's argumentative. She is very angry, right? But, it's not like she's being ultra particular, that's pedantic. Flippant means she's not being very serious and she's being a little casual. No, that's not true. Reverent, well, at the end she does say Father, but she's not somber. She's got a lot of passion going on. This is ambivalent, means you're not sure. Right? Resign means you've given up. So for sure that's your answer. Which one is the next one you need? There was a question on 37. A major hypothesis presented by the speaker is that women and slaves are on the same level. Yes, she does. That's why I was bringing that up in the passage. back when they were